Hey everyone, my name is Chris Glanden. The title of this talk is called Mindgame, and it's all about the psychology behind cyber and how perception gets shaped, how influence is used against us, and how we can flip those same techniques for defensive means. Just a little bit about me real quick. Founder of Barcode Security. We're a firm that focuses on primarily cyber media production, and we also host some community live events as well. I've also been a consultant and advisor for about the past 10 years or so. I host the Barcode podcast and co-founded the Cyber Circus Network. Also part of the Turn Crew. Is the Turn Crew in the house? Where's the Turn Crew? I see you. So the Turn Crew is a friend group that we developed at DEF CON this year, and so I printed these awesome, massive 3D printed medallions that we wear to our local events, so in case you're wondering. I'm also an indie filmmaker. Hopefully you'll stick around after this session to see I Am Machine, the I Am Machine screening, and there's my information on the right, but obviously I'm not really hard to find, so. So what is mentalism? So mentalism is the art of understanding, predicting, and influencing thought. It's often classified as a subcategory of magic, and yet it shifts away from traditional illusion by focusing not on the sleight of hand, but on the sleight of mind. It reveals how easily perception can be shaped and how awareness can break the spell. So mentalism works by guiding attention, framing information, and also steering assumptions. The techniques used are so seamless that they often bypass conscious awareness entirely. Although we do recognize those techniques, the influence factor disappears and the illusion loses its mystique once we are able to sense it. And on stage, it entertains. In cybersecurity, it manipulates. So if you think of an illusionist performing on stage, possibly revealing a word or a sentence or something that a volunteer from the audience is thinking of, or making an impossible prediction come through. On stage, it may look supernatural, but it's purely psychological. And those same techniques used to pull those psychological levers, although used differently, are exactly what cyber attackers rely on. The main objective being to coerce people into actions that they've never intended to take. If you think about phishing, social engineering, brand impersonation, all of these are mentalism in a digital form factor. And then once we understand mentalism, we can start using its principles defensively. The adversarial mindset. So now that we know what mentalism is, let's take a look at how it translates in cybersecurity and our realm. So every exploit begins in the human mind. So whether it's clicking on a phishing link that you think is real, or coding, or a coding misconfiguration, it's almost always triggered by perception, pressure, or persuasion. It's what we call the human attack surface. Attackers weaponize attention, bias, and trust. So in a way, attackers are themselves illusionists. They know how to capture your attention and alter or gain your trust before you ever notice. They understand how our brain is wired to fill in the voids that we notice, and also our need or our craving for speed. Those are naturally embedded attributes that we all have, so they aim to exploit it. If you think about those urgent emails or SMS messages that seem legit because they appear to validate some aspect of what you already know or expect, that's where they hook you. Cognitive shortcuts shape decisions. There was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Kahneman, who you may have heard of. He's a psychologist and Nobel Prize winner who's also known for his research on how people make decisions. And this isn't in the slide deck, but I think it's important to mention. He introduced the idea of our brains using two separate systems, System 1 and System 2. So System 1 is fast, it's instinctive, it's emotional, and it helps us react quickly, but it often relies on shortcuts. And that makes us easy to trick. And then system 2 is slower. It's more deliberate. It's more calculated and logical. And it's what we use when we stop and we think about something carefully. So when we talk about cognitive shortcuts, we're referencing to the moments when system 1 hijacks the decision before system 2 ever gets a chance to process it. And here are some examples of cognitive shortcuts. So anchoring happens when the first piece of information that we see or hear becomes our reference point, even if it's irrelevant. So you get an email saying, your invoice for $4,900 is overdue. Even if you weren't expecting an invoice, that number anchors your attention. Attackers know the first detail you often see or hear becomes truth by default in your own mind. And it's commonly seen in phishing or social engineering attacks or even scam type of websites. Urgency, scarcity effect. So this is essentially acting quickly when time or resources feel limited, like you're up against the clock. This special offer expires in 10 minutes, or update your payment info immediately to avoid suspension. We've all seen that before. Confirmation bias. So confirmation bias refers to our tendency to notice and trust information that matches what we already believe. Not because it's accurate, but because it feels familiar. So an example here would be you getting a security alert in an email that uses the same logo or the same verbiage that your company website uses or their social media page uses. But because it fits the pattern that you expect, you instinctively accept that it's real. And in moments like that, it's not only deception that gets us, it's also the need for validation. And overconfidence. So overconfidence bias makes us overestimate our ability to detect deception or control outcomes. I'd never fall for a phishing email or a social engineering attack because I work in security. We've all heard that. And that type of mindset, that type of belief often limits visibility or it causes blindness. So I think we're all susceptible in our own way. We all have that lever that if pulled, we become a victim. If you have a moment, check out the research from IARPA's Rescind program. If you've heard of that, it's a program that determined that attackers themselves suffer from this too. So they become overconfident once they think they've beaten the system. And that's a weakness I think that defenders can certainly exploit. Offensive mentalism, the attacker's playbook. So now that we know how biases shape decisions, let's take a look at how attackers weaponize those same principles and turn them into their own playbooks. Reconnaissance. So we've all heard this term before. And every illusion is somewhat the same by beginning with observation. Mentalists call it cold reading. So watching posture, micro reactions, how focused you appear to be, your tonality. And attackers do the same thing. Using OSINT techniques, for example, studying LinkedIn profiles, dissecting social media posts, or sifting through dark web breach data. And with that, they're able to essentially build psychological blueprints of their targets before the first strike occurs. Pretexting, so in other words, narrative control. It's the story that makes the impossible seem normal. Mentalists can frame a situation however they want, so the audience wants to comply. Attackers craft believable scripts or runbooks like that, such as a vendor audit, travel invoice, an urgent help desk reset, a missed package delivery. So the trick here isn't based on technology at all, it's more around the storytelling itself. Exploiting trust, reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. Robert Cialdini is the author of 1984's book, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, and he called these persuasion levers. Each lever bypasses logic by appealing to instinct. So when you hear the statement, your CFO needs this ASAP, 99% of the time that you hear that, it's purely just stage direction. Bias triggers, anchoring, urgency, confirmation, overconfidence. So adversaries depend on the same shortcuts that we just discussed in the last slide, but for offensive mentalism. I want to mention choice framing for a second. So choice framing is described as the art of shaping how decisions are presented so that a target's free choice predictably leans toward a specific outcome, all while they believe they acted independently. It's used everywhere. So magic, marketing, sales, negotiation, and yes, social engineering as well. So for example, I'm going to play a video here. It's a demonstration of a concept called number forcing, using a trick called toxic force. And what it does is it sort of alters the perception to make a decision feel free, although the answer is actually fixed. So let's see if this works.
So let's say one of your friends has got a birthday, and let's say it's the 25th of the 11th, say it was 1995. So let's say that was their birthday, the 25th of the 11th, 1995. You're going to force this number on somebody. Can you see that clear enough yet? You're going to type in a number, press the plus sign, plus 0. Times by 0. Now you can shut down your phone, turn the app off. Right, at any point you can go back to the phone. Right, I want you to give me some random numbers. Some numbers so random you don't even know what the total is going to be. So they give you any set of numbers. Let's say they give you a date. Say 2010, a memorable date. And you're going to press the times. How much money you got in your pocket? 25 quid? Okay, 25. Times by what's? Give me a 3-digit number. 369. How much change have you got on you? 73 quid. And any other 3-digit number. Right, when you press equals, it will be the 25th of the 11th, 1995, the number that comes up. That's the way the app works. You're just going to type in a number, press the plus, 0, times, 0, close your phone up. When you go back to it, no matter what sequence of numbers are put in, you press times each time. When you equals, it will always equal your predetermined number. That's how it works.
See, I can't play that trick tonight on anybody at the bar because now you know how it works. But it's not, obviously it's not magic at all. It's decision architecture. And it's constructing those choices so the target feels in control even when the outcome is predetermined. There was a comment on this video that said, okay, well, if I know how a calculator works, I'll start to see the sum after every button pressed. And there actually is a way to fix that by pulling down the scientific calculator and doing that way, but that was just too long for this demo. But nonetheless, I thought it was very interesting. All right, defensive mentalism. So read the intent. We've all heard, or we've all seen how easy it is to be influenced, but the same psychology that attackers use to manipulate can help defenders detect. And this is an area we don't typically talk about too much. When we talk about mentalism or illusion, we're normally talking about the offensive side. So apply perceptual awareness. So our brains are built for pattern recognition, which means the fastest way to spot deception is to look for pattern breaks. Maybe the sender's tone suddenly changes, or their usual sign-off is missing, or they're texting or calling you at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m. when they never do, or 10 a.m. when they know you're sleeping, whatever. Those micro anomalies are early indicators of manipulation. Influence auditing. So this is more like a self-check. When a message hits your inbox, don't ask, is this legitimate? Instead, ask yourself, what is this trying to make me feel? Authority, urgency, curiosity, and fear. These are the 4 primary persuasion levers that attackers use. If you can identify the lever, then you can neutralize the pull. There's a very well-known behavioral expert named Chase Hughes. If you're on TikTok late at night, doom scrolling, you've probably seen him. Check him out when you can. It's some people believe him, some people don't. But he basically calls this building self-influence immunity. He points out that awareness in your own psychological triggers is the first defense against manipulation, because whatever you're unaware of tends to control you. Pattern recognition. So insecurity, intuition gets dismissed as gut feeling, but it's really just pattern recognition in disguise. The more familiar you become with how social engineering looks and feels, the faster your brain is trained to flag those patterns subconsciously. That's why crisis exercises, tabletop exercises, phishing simulations, if they're properly administered, they work. And they're designed to sort of train that instinct, or at least that's what the goal is. Pause before responding. So pulling off an illusion of any type relies heavily on speed, and attackers rely on automatic system one type reactions. A deliberate pause of even 2 seconds shifts control to logical thinking. Use that pause to verify the source, check for anchors or inconsistencies, and ask a simple clarifying question or call the sender directly. So make it procedural. Pause, verify, respond. And that tiny habit is your cognitive circuit breaker. It breaks the illusion and buys you more time to act correctly. So we've all seen manipulation techniques used across countless attack vectors, and now deepfakes are pushing that manipulation even further, increasing our overall susceptibility. And also, it makes detection mechanisms much more difficult to design as well. But take a quick listen to this example, which is, let's just say something that you may receive via a voicemail.
Hey Mark, it's Jessica Finance. Listen, unfortunately, we're short on cash this cycle and payroll is blocked. If you don't mind, please move exactly $11,750 to vendor 5421 now, using the transfer link I just sent over to you. I'll approve it on my end. Due to the nature of the vendor relationship, please do it immediately. As you know, they are a high priority partner, and we don't want to sacrifice that in any way. So, if you run into any issues, call me on my cell right away.
So yes, that definitely sounds robotic to us. But the point of this was using 11 Labs. If you haven't used 11 Labs, check it out. But you only need about 30 seconds of someone's voice to make it somewhat believable to someone that isn't knowing what's coming. So I still think it's free too if you want to try it. But the point is the tech is scalable and affordable at this point in time, and anyone can really put together a synthetic voice deepfake when needed. But after hearing that and now understanding the influential triggers,
Hey Mark.
We all have to kind of identify what our own vulnerabilities are. So mine is time pressure. For others, it could be authority, it could be ego. So the attackers probe at those weak spots with urgency or flattery. So when you think about it, recognizing your own bias is like finding open ports before someone else does. Sorry, we're going to skip through this one. Oppositional human factors. So this concept is focused on designing environments that exploit an attacker's psychology and is a concept validated with IARPA and IEEE research. Create intentional friction. So instead of making systems smoother for users, we make them slightly rougher for the attackers. Imagine extra verification steps, misleading file names, decoy data trails. Friction forces an adversary to stop and think, and when they think, they slow down. Exploit attacker biases. Attackers are human too. Well, most of them are. They suffer from curiosity bias, overconfidence, impatience, everything that we do as well. They'll chase shiny targets or skip checks when they should, which leads to assuming victory too early. And we can use those biases to our advantage and make traps irresistible for them. Psychological shoots. This is interesting. So think of psychological shoots as funhouse mirrors. The attacker sees progress as it's continuing to move about, but everything is an illusion. So you have false endpoints that look valuable. Honeypots, deception techniques, they all lead to some sort of intel telemetry. Planning fake APIs that just waste recon time. Each one of those techniques drains attackers' momentum while also allowing you to trace their movement. And adversary-centered design. So this isn't just my theory. IARPA's research noted within their recent program, which I mentioned earlier, that cognitive friction measurably alters an attacker's behavior. It's adversarial-centered design, meaning that if you understand how attackers think, you can then design against it. Lastly, smoke and mirrors done right. So this is essentially deploying those psychological shoots that I mentioned as defensive deception. So use deception as a tool. When implemented right, it's invisible to end users, but magnetic to adversaries. Decoys blend into real environments. The illusion draws attackers in, and the system learns from their behavior. We touched on this in the last slide when we spoke about honeypots. And the goal is to exploit illusions in order to protect reality. Defensive deception patterns. So let's just break down a few patterns. So one is, phantom file shares, decoy data that triggers an alert when probed or accessed. Backstage pass, planted fake credentials that trigger red flags when used. Identity doppelganger, so lookalike accounts that only malicious actors enumerate. Hall of mirrors, false infrastructure that reflects an attacker's recon attempts, and breadcrumb trails, which are tempting links, or file paths that lead intruders straight into telemetry traps. And these are just a few techniques, I think, but if you look at it, they're all pretty much a controlled illusion or a psychological tripwire, if you will. So in conclusion, I think the real takeaway here is just recognizing that our own minds are endlessly exploitable. In fact, I think the human mind is probably the most exploitable system on the planet, and I think attackers know that as well. So understand the illusion, master perception, defend reality. Again, we're all susceptible. We all have our mental levers that can be pulled, but strengthening our awareness weakens our vulnerability. Remember that attackers don't have to breach your network. They only have to reroute your thinking. And that's all I got. Thank you. Here's all the references too. I couldn't get them on each slide, but if you want to take a snapshot of that, or I can send it to you. There's some really cool research that I found throughout this. So I know I finished early, so if anybody has any questions, if not, yes.
So we talk about psychology a lot, its modes of thinking. I guess my question is, it time as an industry that we start considering things like mental health, mindfulness, fatigue, how that affects our decision-making process, how it makes us go towards system and thinking a bit more, and how being mindful, like taking those two steps to be aware of our perceptions, be aware of our own bias. Do you think it's time to start integrating that more into our industry as part of a solution to this?
Yes. How you go about that, I think that's the challenge, is trying to integrate that into number one, corporate America, and number two, but I mean, if us as an industry and community-based events like this, we keep pushing that forward, I think that's a great place to start, but I completely agree with you.
I Yeah, I started thinking about like how I would encourage corporate to do this. Is there's explaining that mental health or mindfulness has benefits and helps reduce risk as well, and therefore possible financial.
Agreed.
So I'm trying to think about how we could, pitch this to non-community.
I think it depends on the culture of the environment as well, whether they're accepting to discuss that. So. Yes.
Two things. One, I think one of the ways you could try to encourage that at a minimum is to encourage your executives to not communicate in a get this done right now. So that any message that comes out from external that looks like them, it sounds different.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a culture of not doing that, then it looks weird immediately, and it'll trick that 2 seconds. So
Stop the enabler from, yeah.
my other question, oddly related, so I know that research is based on external attackers, so infiltrators to the network and how they operate within the network. Do you think the biases are any different for an insider threat? And if so, how would it change from what you've recommended there?
I don't think, I can't see it changing that much because I think it's just a different attack vector. I think that it's the same mindset. I can't speak for everything. I think insider threat, there's different motives involved. But I think you definitely, as an insider, have an advantage for detection. I mean, for not being detected. But I think the motive would be the same.
So they could still be susceptible to overconfidence?
Oh, yes. Yep, I believe so.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so you mentioned, how would you help defend your own mind against people who are trying to social engineer you or use psychology against you?
So, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
So how would you defend against people who are using psychology against you?
So I'm in security, so I would never get social engineered. Again, I think we all have our personal lever on what makes us susceptible. You're saying if I'm able to detect?
Like, how would anyone be able to strengthen their defenses against that?
I got you. So I think awareness is key, and just trying to be aware of those triggers and I don't have the answer on how you embed that into a workforce. I wish I did, through training, through education. But I think awareness is probably the first, and then again having that procedural, stop, respond, think, and then move forward and try to embed that into the workflows that you have. And then that, along with technology, obviously, you got to follow that up with some sort of technology that could protect you. So, yep.
What was the name of the application you mentioned?
Oh, 11 Labs. 11 Labs? Yeah. You got it. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it.